Hi everyone, this is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and since I played in a couple of tournaments this past weekend, nothing super prestigious or anything, but still, since I finally got out there and took part in the battles myself, I thought I'd show you a couple of interesting, in a way, games that I played. So the first one is from a rapid tournament that was played on Friday night, and my opponent is a strong junior from the state. It's about it's been close to expert. I think he's in the mid to low 1900s at the moment, but I'm sure he'll be an expert pretty soon. Anyway, I had white in this game, and my opponent's a very good sharp player, or at least he likes sharp positions. I think I've played him two other times. I played him actually in the Saturday tournament as well, and there I beat him in a sharp game, and I beat him earlier in a game that I covered here, I don't know, I guess almost a year ago, in von Henning-Schauer Gambit, and that game, as you saw, was very complicated. So I thought in this game I would just keep things quiet and try my luck in that respect. So just keep things boring, see if you can play an ending. And the only reason I'm going to show you this game, or rather this fragment, I just have the game up to a certain point, is simply to give some of you guys an idea of what to play if you don't like the King's Indian. So I had white, and I played knight f3, so I didn't want to allow any von Henning-Schauer gambits, although, of course, with knight f6, he'd already ruled it out. But I thought I'd just play knight f3, rule out all the gambit lines, and just keep things positional, see how that would go. So he went into a King's Indian, and I decided to play the dry as dust exchange variation. And I say this only half joking. Some people play this because they are just groveling for a draw, but it's possible to play this because you really want to just grind the guy down. I think there's a game of mine, I think I did a show of it here, played many years ago by me in the same variation, where I pretty nicely and cleanly outplayed a good master some years ago. And I haven't used this variation that often, but every once in a while, when I just feel like a simple positional game, I'll give it a whirl, and it often works surprisingly well, at least as a surprise weapon. Okay, so bishop to g5. The threat is, of course, to take on f6, and then play knight to d5, or to play knight to d5 right away, and it'll win material. So rook to e8 is one of the standard ways of escaping, because now if bishop f6, knight to d5, bishop to d8. So that takes care of that. So nothing's going on there. So knight to d5 is standard. Takes, c6, bishop c4, takes. And now black has tried various moves. Knight to c6 a long time ago was the most common move, but now knight to d7 is considered best. And that's what my opponent played. Now, the basic idea of this, or one of the basic ideas, is to play knight f6 when retreating the bishop would cost the e4 pawn. So knight to d2 is typical rejoinder. My opponent played knight to c5. And here I had more or less forgotten what to do in this position. I hadn't bothered with it in a while, so it was just kind of an offhand decision. The main move here is to castle queenside. And the point is that if knight to d3 check, well, this is just not really any good. I think we can just play king to b1. And on knight f2, I'm guessing here a bit. Let's see, which rook should we use for this? We could also just play the immediate bishop takes f7 as well. And I even wonder if knight to c4 could be possible. Probably not. So let's go this way. So knight h1, bishop f7. Okay, if king f8, bishop takes g6. So king h8, bishop takes e8. And, well, looks like white's just going to win a piece here, since the knight on h1 is trapped and the bishop on e8 is not. So, as I said, castles is the main move, and now black plays knight to e6, bishop e3, knight f4, and because the g-pawn is hanging as well as the bishop on d5, white should play bishop takes f4, e takes f4, and, okay, the game just goes from here. White can play f3, you can play knight c4, and, alright, it's probably about equal. I mean, white has a very good bishop. The knight will be very good on c4, but black has the bishop pair. So, objectively, this probably doesn't promise white anything, but certainly it's playable. Anyway, another move is king to e2. This gets played from time to time. Covers the d3 square, but I still didn't like having the king as exposed. So, and of course I saw knight to e6 and wanted to avoid it. But after bishop e3, takes, maybe this is, I'm not sure. This might be a slightly better version of the other line. Maybe not. Anyway, knight to c4, and play continues from there. So I just castled, simply getting my king out of the way. I don't have to worry about checks on d3, and I don't have to worry about the g-pawn hanging in any variations. But, you know, the king isn't covering the d3 square, so then I could come to d3 anyway. Anyway, black played bishop to e6, and now I played rook f to c1. So I'm trying to gain some kind of static advantage here. He played rook a to c8, which is fine. I played bishop to e3, and here he went awry. So he sees that I've got pressure against b7, there's pressure against a7, and he's maybe also thinking that if he takes, my d-pawn could become dangerous. So putting it all together, he played the move b6, which at first sight looks pretty reasonable. But in fact, this is, especially in conjunction with his next move, a serious positional error. So he should in fact have gone active here and played knight to d3. This would have been a much better move. So, you know, I can take, for instance, and he could take. Maybe bishop takes is also just fine. Even if I take here, okay, he's still getting a lot of activity. His rook's going to come to c2. This pawn is vulnerable. So, yeah, these guys are a little bit weak, and I'm threatening that, but black's activity, I think, fully compensates for all of this. So this, I think, would be the way to go. Maybe I don't have to play rook c8, but I think in any case he's going to stand well. So equal, I mean not better, but equal. But after b6, I mean this is a move, at least, or an idea that I wouldn't consider for more than 10 seconds. But you know, in experience and maybe a little bit of rating fear, he thought he should play solidly, led him to make a gruesome positional error. So I took, and that was even a further mistake. Then I took, and I played knight to c4. And next comes rook to d1, and white simply winning in this position. Black's bishop is absolutely dreadful. It's just completely useless. It's got no way into the game. I get the d file. I think he probably played king to f8 here. I think this is what happened. Rook to d1, and maybe king e7. But after rook to d5, I'm simply winning a pawn. What did he do? Maybe he played rook to a6, so that seems familiar. I played a3, and probably he played f6. I played rook takes c5. Something like king to d7 occurred. And basically, this position is hopeless. So the rooks got traded sooner or later. He tried, I centralized my king. He tried to force a pawn weakness, so he encouraged me to play h3. So I had played f3 and h3. And so he played f5, king e7, king f6, king g5, and so on. And in the meantime, I just played b4, a4, b5, a5, a6, and then b6. And he resigned. So it was a very, very easy game. And against, you know, quite a good player. I mean, someone who gave me a lot of difficulty in the previous game. And the third game we played was interesting, too. It was actually a very short game, but one where it was dramatic almost to the very end. So those of you who are looking for an easy game against the King's Indian, at least the classical King's Indian, you might want to give this line a spin every once in a while. And again, not as a drawing weapon, but simply as a way of forcing, let's say, your fire-breathing opponents to have to deal with some positional chess instead of just getting their way and trying to blow you off the board. Okay, so let's take a look at the second game, which I think also shows one approach to preparing for young firebrands. Okay, so this was played in the next tournament, which was a slow tournament, relatively speaking, game 85. And my opponent is, I think, 10 years old, and he's 1985, and he's already been an expert. So he's very strong, or certainly very promising. And I have a clean score against him, so I've played him actually quite a few times in blitz and rapid, and now in slower controls with a very clean and, well, not only a clean score, but generally winning pretty convincingly. And I hope to keep it this way as long as possible, because sooner or later he'll be better than I am. And if he keeps at it, of course, he should be much better than I am. but the more I can pick on him while he's younger, the maybe the better my chances of having a little psychological edge before it's just absolutely too late. Anyway, in this game, I knew I was white. He always plays this same variation against the Rui, and generally hasn't played it especially well. So I spent a few minutes preparing this before the game, and I think I did a good job of prepping. So c3, knight f6, d4, bishop to b6. And this is just one of the moves that I prepared for. I mean, there are alternatives on the last two moves. And here I had decided that I would play the following: bishop c6, dc6, and knight e5. And just put the burden of proof on him to show compensation. So the basic point is that, first of all, he can't take this pawn. He cannot take this pawn, because after queen to e2, okay, there's some problems. If he plays queen to d5, I just play f3. If he plays bishop to f5, then g4 is winning. Bishop retreats, I take the bishop, and then I take the knight. And if queen to d5, then f3 is winning. Now, he could play, he does have a way out. He can castle here. And after queen e4, play f6. And this might be a pretty reasonable way to go. It seemed to me that I was fine, though. And after knight takes c6, bc, castles, bishop a6. So black certainly has some compensation. His light squared bishop is very good, but I'm a pawn up, and his queenside pawns are a little bit messed up. And after rook to e1, let's say queen to d7, preparing rook a to e8, and protecting the c6 pawn, I trade. Okay, he can play c5, and I play bishop to e3. And I think that white is okay. Maybe has a small edge, but it's I think a reasonable way for black to proceed. I think this has its merits for black. At any rate, what he played is okay too. He castled, and now I could play f3 right away, but I felt I preferred a4. This is still part of my prep. a5, and now f3. Okay, so here he's got to prove it. If he doesn't, then I'm just going to be up a pawn, and a very magnificent pawn at that. I mean, this central structure I've got with this little mushroom of pawns here on c3, d4, e4, and f3, and I guess we could even add it with the pawns on b2 and g2, provides a very nice cover and quite a lot of space for my forces. So he's got to find some way of breaking through this before I finish my development, or at least before I catch up in development. So right now he's well ahead in development. He's got his bishop here, but he's got to prove that there's something there. So he played c5, which is very reasonable, and I think what I did against this was perfectly good too. I played knight to c4. So if he plays c takes d4, of course I take his bishop on b6 and only then recapture on d4. So he played bishop to a7, and now I have a choice between a couple of moves, and they're actually probably both okay. Bishop to e3 is certainly playable, and I may come back to this later on, but I think the move I played is natural and also quite good. I played d5. And here was black's one and only opportunity, I think, to obtain something at least resembling good play for the pawn. So you might want to take a look at this position and try to work it out on your own. You know, this is a practical problem that many of us face. I mean, who play gambits at any point. Now, my opponent probably didn't intend to play a gambit, but as a matter of fact, that's what he has played. It's just simply one that people don't generally accept. But what's black to do? I mean, if I'm left alone, I'm just going to castle, put my bishop on f4 or g5 or maybe e3, bring the knight to d2 or to a3, and he's going to suffocate behind this wall of pawns that I have. Well, in the game he played rook to e8, and okay, this has a threat to take on d5, but after I castle, his position is clearly worse, I think. I don't think he has any real compensation for the pawn any longer. What I think he had to do, and I did see this during the game, was knight takes e4. So fe4, queen h4 check, king f1, and now, okay, he could try f5, but I think just king to g1 is okay. So queen takes e4 is probably best, hitting the knight, hitting the d-pawn, though it's protected, and also preparing moves like bishop to g4. So I had seen this and intended knight b to d2, queen takes d5, and now maybe queen to f3, although it might be even a little bit more accurate to play king f2, preparing to slide the rook from h1 first and then play king to g1. So sample line would be something like rook to e8, queen f3, queen to g5, rook f1, preparing to quote-unquote castle, and of course to put pressure against f7. So bishop e6, king g1, and okay, I think that white's advantage is pretty genuine. I'll follow up with b3, so this knight's protected, so I can move this knight with impunity. And alright, black has 2 pawns for the piece. He's got the bishop here, but his bishops are more or less restrained, and these pawns are also doubled, so it's not maybe 2 full pawns, and he has no passers either. So again, black definitely has some compensation here, but not all that much. It should be, I would expect to win this position against a peer most of the time. Okay, but still, this I think was the best try. Let me go back here, and I'll just point out that on bishop to e3, black can have a similar idea. So takes and takes. And this by itself I didn't really want. I didn't want to let him undouble his pawns. Bishop to e6, knight b to a3. And now here too, knight takes e4 can be played. So takes, check. Here king to d2 is best. And now, okay, he could play queen takes e4. And here he's got 2 pawns for the piece, although I still think that his compensation isn't quite enough. So it's not terrible. He's not losing, but it probably shouldn't be enough either. If he tries rook a to d8 instead, then I think with accurate play, white can again maintain a clear advantage. So for instance, queen f3, f5, rook a to d1. So kind of like king f2 and rook f1 in the game. So this time it's a queenside version. So bishop d4, now king c2. So again, black has only 1 pawn for the piece. He'll end up with the 2nd pawn, but it shouldn't be enough. Actually, still it's just 1 pawn. So queen d7, threatening bishop to f5, and threatening to take on a4. Right, so that's how the 2nd pawn comes around. But I think it's pretty clear here that black's compensation is more or less at an end, and white is just up material more or less for nothing. Okay, so after bishop to a7, I think bishop to e3 is possible as well. Alright, so back to the game. d5, rook e8 instead of knight takes e4, now castling. And from here, it's just fun. For me, not fun for him. So I'll just show you the remaining games fairly quickly, and you can enjoy this with me. Unless you're unless you like this variation for black, or you know who my opponent is, and in that case you can mourn. Okay, so knight b to a3, just developing. Bishop to b7, bishop g5. Okay, and he played actually what I expected. I expected him to do this, but now I thought he would play knight to h5 and try for whatever play he could get. It's not enough, but it seemed to be the best try. But instead he played king to g7, which was really mysterious. I mean, it just asks me to play knight e3 to jump into the f5 square. And now instead of bishop to c8, he played queen to d7. So, you know, some people just have a really tough time making a retreating move. You know, it's a little embarrassing to play bishop to c8, especially when you look at that bishop on a7. But yeah, it's almost a puzzle. You know, how did that bishop get on a7? Right? It looks almost impossible. Anyway, so he just decides to let me go to f5. But I'm not in a hurry. So I play c4 first of all, sealing up the queen side. He plays bishop a6, knight to b5, bishop to b8. Okay, now knight f5 check. King h7, and okay, I play queen c2. And this is an example of what I like to call a semi-threat. Actually, this is a real threat. I am threatening to play e5, and when the knight moves, to play knight to d6 check and grab the rook. If nothing else, I mean, there may be even better, but there's at least that. So he's rightly uncomfortable being on this diagonal. He doesn't want to play king to g8, though, because that allows knight takes h6 with check, so that's inconvenient. So he decided to play king to h8. Unfortunately, this is, well, I don't want to say jumping out of the frying pan. I mean, it's even worse than that. So it's like jumping out of the oven and into Hades. I mean, this is how bad the position is for him. So I play queen to c3, and this is becoming nightmarish. The only way he can defend the knight is with queen to d8, which is what he played. And I originally thought to play bishop to e5, but I thought, okay, rook e5, queen e5, c6, right, this is, okay, it's not really messy, that's an exaggeration. After knight b to d6, I mean, I'm still winning very comfortably. But I thought, I decided to look for something even better, and I found something even better. So you might want to see what it is. It forced immediate resignation. So I played knight takes c7, and that was the end of the game. So the rooks are forked, and not only that, but when I take on e8, that's going to put more pressure on the knight on f6. And the problem is after bishop takes c7, I do the same thing, bishop takes c7, and his queen can no longer keep the knight protected. So he either loses the queen or gets checkmated like this. So very, very quick, very painful, well, for him, very, very enjoyable last round win for me to clinch victory in the tournament. And again, this is not a bad player. I mean, he's been an expert. He's 1985 right now, and he's just 10 years old, maybe 11 now. So very strong, but this can happen. I mean, it happens to kids sometimes too, that when things are going bad, they just snowball. But also, I think if you're not prepared to gambit, sometimes people who are not generally gambiteers or are intending to gambit will often have a tough time, not really feeling, let's say, psychologically prepared to play without material. And I think that happened to him too. So he played c5, which was in the right spirit, but I think after this, he was already running out of ideas. And knight takes e4, I think, probably didn't occur to him, or if it did, he just saw that it's a sack. He's not winning material back with that, and just decided to play rook e8. And after that, it's just all downhill from there. So I think that these two games show at least something that you can consider when you're playing against pretty talented young players. So in both cases, I was essentially going for trying to get them out of their comfort zone. So in the first case, to just make the game kind of dull, or at least dull from their point of view. And in the second case, it was simply a matter of taking the kid again out of his comfort zone and trying to make him prove that he really had something there. And as a player who plays kind of quickly and can often just make these really routine moves, and this is really the kind of position where you have to stop and think very carefully. I mean, whenever you're faced with something like this, okay, so you haven't done anything wrong here, at least if you've done your theoretical homework, and you have to try to figure out, well, what's going on? How do I justify my play here? Because you should assume that if you're playing an opening that line that's respectable, that's in the books, that you've played before, that you know, or at least are pretty sure that grandmasters have played, it can't just be refuted by a move like f3. So this is a place where you just got to stop, really slow down, and come up with your best ideas at this point. Because as we saw in the game, if you wait just a little bit, if you just make a few kind of natural moves that don't put your opponent to the test, you can just end up a pawn down for nothing. And you saw how quickly it snowballed. I mean, after he played rook to e8, everything was just a disaster after this. So I just keep developing, and all he's doing is making weaknesses. And with c4, I mean, this pawn structure I have is just, I mean, it's just the end of his game. I mean, none of his pieces are playing here. His rook on a8's out of the game, the bishop on a6, all I can do is trade. And if he trades it, I play a takes b5, well, then c6 is impossible. I mean, it's going to cost him a second pawn. All right, this bishop on b8 is a joke. I said the rook's already out of play here, and he's got gaps all over his king side. And his queen's not really doing anything special either. I mean, it's, again, just a horrifying position for black. So I check, I play here, and in this position, none of his pieces are even threatening anything on my side of the board. So only his pawns, only the a pawn, the c pawn, and the g pawn even threaten my side of the board. Oh, sorry, the rook too. The rook on e8 hits e4. Other than that, none of his pieces even threaten my side of the board, even touch a square on my side of the board. And yeah, after this, of course, everything just collapses. All right, so hope you enjoyed these short little games, and maybe learned something that you can use too. And I think that final point I was making too about what you do when you're on the receiving end of something like my bishop takes c6, d takes c6, knight takes e5 try. I think that's very important as well. Whenever you see some new move especially one that is ambitious like what I played, that's a place to slow down and really do your best to work things out up front. Okay, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.